Okay, Soham, can you hear me? And can you see that Indian pluralism?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, great. Does my video look like it's lagging or something?
No, it's okay. It's not lagging.
Video and audio are in sync?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's lagging a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. So let me try to fix that now. Sometimes that happens. So let us stop this. Okay, now the video audio looks okay?
Yeah, yeah. Now it's okay.
Okay, good. So let
Okay.
me now.
So let's start the meet.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, everyone. We would first like to thank you all for taking your valuable time to join us for our talk. I am Soham Kumar, and I will be the host for the evening. Indic Club at Pilani is a group of like-minded individuals, and we are concerned with the academic study of Indian knowledge systems and themes of Indic revivalism. So, through rigorous academic exploration and unbiased study of our indigenous history, culture, and philosophy, we strive to liberate ourselves from the effects of coloniality and embrace the strength of our roots. Before I introduce our esteemed speaker, allow me to briefly set the stage for today's enlightening session. What do we mean by plurality? Pluralism in India is a tapestry that weaves together various threads of diversity, tolerance, and inclusivity. It is a reflection of the harmonious coexistence of different beliefs, traditions, and even languages that have thrived on this sacred land for centuries. And to take us on a journey into this world of pluralism, we have the privilege of hosting a scholar, translator, and a musician, Dr. Srinivas Reddy. Dr. Reddy is an erudite scholar who pursued his passion for classical South Asian languages and literatures at two prestigious institutes, Brown University and the University of California, Berkeley. His scholarly pursuits led him to delve deep into the richness of Telugu and the Sanskrit literature. As a translator, Dr. Reddy has accomplished remarkable feats, rendering ancient texts into English, making them accessible to a broad audience. Notable among his works are translations of Krishnadev Ray's Telugu epic, Amuktamalyada, and the Giver of the Worn Garland, and Kalidasa's play Malvikagni Mitram, The Dancer and the King. Through his translations, he has unlocked the wisdom and beauty of these ancient literary gems to a wider audience. Not limited to the realm of academia, he is also an accomplished musician. As a concert guitarist, he has mesmerized audience around the world with his soulful renditions, creating a harmonious bridge between cultures and hearts. Currently residing in Gujarat, he shares his expertise as a faculty member at the prestigious IIT Gandhinagar. He continues to inspire and shape young minds, fostering a deep appreciation for India's cultural heritage. Today, we are honored to have him grace this platform and share his insight on the topic pluralism in India, ancient roots, and future potentials. Through his vast knowledge and experience, we hope to gain a deeper understanding of India's pluralistic heritage and its significance in sharing our nation's future. Without further ado, I would like to invite Srinivas sir to take the stage and captivate us with the insights on this topic. Sir.
Thank you very much, Soham. That was a lovely introduction. And earlier you were asking me what is the definition of pluralism, but I think you probably gave the best definition of pluralism that I've heard. So that was very good. And main thing that I want to say before we start is really I believe one of the big problems in education in India, everywhere in the whole world, modern education system, is the idea that knowledge is a thing, is an object that is transmitted from like teacher, guru, whatever, and then shishya is there just absorbing it and then has to regurgitate it. That to me is almost the antithesis of what knowledge really means. Knowledge to me has to be dialogical. There has to be some discussion, some engagement, because knowledge is not a thing. It's a living, experiential, constantly evolving entity. It's like a living being. So it's not something that just gets passed on. It has to be done in a certain way. And I can talk more about that later too. But I think what I'm trying to say is that I'll try to present some ideas today, but what I really feel is the most productive thing for all of us is having good questions and good dialogue. And, it's sometimes hard to do that also because, like the title says, plural, everybody has a different thought. Every individual is a unique perspective on the world. So sometimes it's hard, to encounter someone with a different perspective. But in fact, that is the root of what real knowledge development evolution is about, is new perspectives, differing perspectives, evolving and growing together. So even within this time that we have together, I'll try to keep my comments, pretty succinct, but raise some important points, which, again, I don't have any answers. I'm also thinking through these things deeply, and that's why I love engaging with students and learning more. So basically, I'm saying that we're all going to learn together, hopefully, and it should be an open platform after I finish a few introductory comments. So one thing, and I'll get this thing 1 second. Rajmohan Gandhi spent a lot of time in Gandhinagar with us, and we got to be very close friends. And he used to tell a lot of great stories. And one of the stories he told was about Gandhiji's prayer meetings when he was in Delhi, and how every meeting started with 2 minute shanti, so 2 minutes of silence. And that can, has a profound effect actually, just stopping, taking 2 minutes, taking some time just to become centered, and then have that, what we call sankalpana is such an important, or sankalpa, all, just that one thought of a resolution, an idea that this is going to be good, or I want this to go in a certain way, that has a profound effect on the actual experience of what is to come. So let us have 2 minute shanti, and with the sankalpa that we have a fruitful, open, inclusive discussion, and we can all learn together. So here we go. Okay, thank you very much. Now I will share the screen and go through some slides. There's only about 10 slides, and present some ideas. During that, it might be easier if we don't have any questions. I'll just kind of get through some of these ideas. But if you take some notes or you have some questions, just jot them down, and then we can have a good, robust discussion. And like I said, I'm not trying to present my view on something or make a certain kind of claim about something. Really what I'm expressing is my own feelings, questions, ideas that I'm also thinking through as we all deal with, several issues about, not only India's future, but the whole world's future. So here we go. Let me see if this will work. Okay. Okay, can everyone see that? Soham, can you see that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So Indian pluralism, and when we'll get into all of these terms, ancient origins and future potentials. Basically, my feelings about this are the idea of a kind of globalized, multicultural world is something that we kind of think is something that came out of modernity, when colonialism happened or people were traveling more and meeting different cultures. But in many ways, India was already an incredibly multicultural, multilingual place from its very beginning. And I think because of that history, we were able to develop some very interesting philosophies and practices to deal with that kind of a situation for thousands of years. And of course, a lot of those things we've in some ways kind of lost touch with, in some ways are still present. But I really believe that those ancient origins and those old kind of practices and histories that we have are the things that will really be the key to, again, not only India's future, but I feel like India and its history really has a blueprint in many ways for the global future that we all have to think about. And and this is also to say that I think India, our philosophies are wonderful, but we also have a lot that we can learn from other cultures too. So this is an important thing that, again, there's always a refinement of ideas over time. Of course, if we looked at the long history of Indian history, from Vedic times, let us say, onward, we could see a lot of those points of evolution. But here I'm just going to run through, in the beginning, some of the really important philosophical ideas that I think are very interesting. So one thing, and this is going to set up some kind of broad differentials, you could say, again, big brushstrokes, but broad differentials between what we would, in a very general sense, call Western civilizational thought versus Eastern civilizational thought. And Eastern here specifically Indian, because Chinese thought is also quite different and also just as ancient. But in this case, let us say basically Western European type of civilizational thought based in Greeks and Romans compared to Indian thought. So one of the most primary things, and I think a very beautiful thing, and a thing that many of the cosmologists of today are kind of realizing themselves, is about space and time, the most basic components of our understanding of the universe. And in that regard, we have a concept, ananta and anadi, and you probably have all heard of this. So without an end, ananta, the universe will just keep going eternally. And at the same time, if we kind of went in a backwards direction, it's also anadi, in the sense that there was no point of beginning. It also it was beginningless. It was going on for forever and ever. It's kind of like infinity in both directions. So it's a very, cosmological sense, universal, a very kind of epic sense of what time means. And I'm introducing this now because, I'll explain how this kind of flows into this differential between East and West. So I'll just read you one passage. I just translated some sections of the Mahabharata, and right in the very beginning, there's this beautiful passage, which I think is exactly what I'm trying to get at. And of course, the Mahabharata is, quite late, meaning it's post-Vedic, post-Upanishadic. So the Upanishads are really the texts that we really see this kind of Ananta Anadi ideas expressed, but of course they flow into all later literature and kinds of thinking. So I'll just read this quote. Whatever things can be seen, whether moving or unmoving, will eventually pass away at the end of the eon when the whole world dissolves. And then at the beginning of the next eon, all these things will be seen again, their various forms naturally coming into existence like a ripe fruit in season. Thus, the wheel of life keeps turning without beginning and without end, Anadi and Ananta, as the agent of the continually expanding and collapsing universe. I mean, this is a brilliant kind of, summation of what a lot of, astrophysicists, cosmologists are coming to understanding today. So it's fascinating that, these very profound ideas were very deeply embedded in our own, culture and systems of thought. So the kind of big differential I was talking about with East and West, a lot of times now we talk about dharmic traditions. So of course, those are traditions that are based on the concept of dharma. And of course, in today's world, we have these isms, and which is a complicated, also a Western derived concept, but we can get into that discussion a little later. But for now, generally the dharmic traditions are considered, like Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism, in that category. And it kind of contrasts to that, you have the Abrahamic traditions. So those are traditions that derive from the founder Abraham. So that's Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Now, in those traditions, the Western traditions, you really have a sense of time that is not cyclical, that is not repetitive. It is what we would call like linear progressive time. So the arrow that you see on the right, it's just like things are just going to keep going. And there has a certain interesting implication within it, which is that human civilization constantly is progressing and getting better. So you might have read Steven Pinker's book, came out a couple of years ago, Enlightenment Now. His whole thesis in that book is basically like every generation is better as we progress. And even though we think things are bad now, things were much worse in the past. Okay, that might be true. I don't know. We could debate that. The point is, it doesn't allow for any kind of, coming back. It's always linear and it's always just moving in one direction. This is in sharp contrast, based on this Ananta Anadi ideas, to all the dharmic traditions, no matter how much they disagree on various issues of, philosophy or doctrine or practice. All of them fundamentally believe in the idea of samsara. Samsara is infinite cyclical time. And that's how Ananta Anadi can happen. You can't have this line, for example, this has a beginning. And, one day it'll probably have an end. For us, there's a beginning. I mean, somewhere in that circle, it's beginning. And it's going to end at some point, but it's just going to keep going and going and going. And this is a fundamental principle that we all have to appreciate as a beautiful contribution to world thought, the idea of cyclical time. Now, you don't have to believe in karma or, purva janma or punarjanma, any of that. I mean, there are those things, but the basic idea that time and space work in cycles. This is a fundamental and beautiful concept. Okay, so now let us discuss one kind of important thing. I'll run through these quite fast because they do get a little philosophical. But a very important word that we should all think about is pramana. And what you would basically translate to, or I mean, pramana doesn't exactly translate. That's another issue, translating terms. But epistemology fundamentally is the concept that we're getting at. And epistemology basically means the systems through which we understand the world. Also, the systems which allow us to validate knowledge as true or false. As you know, I'm experiencing something, I have to kind of make an assumption, or I have to make a determination rather, whether this thing is correct or not. So I'll just run through a couple of them. You might have heard of them. And of course, these pramanas also differ very greatly in all the Indian traditions. So many different schools have different numbers, but these 6 are quite common. So one of the most famous, of course, is Anumana. Anumana means inference. And the classic example they always give is, if you see smoke, then you can infer that there is fire. So you didn't see the fire exactly. You didn't, experience the fire. But through this process of our intellect, through this process of Anumana, we're able to infer when there's smoke, there's fire. And therefore, if I see the smoke, I can pretty much conclude very nicely that there is fire. Upamana is another way we do. This is analogy. So maybe you've never seen, pizza or something. And someone says, oh, it's like a big naan with paneer on top. Okay, that doesn't approximate what pizza is, but it gives you a little sense of what pizza might be like. So analogy is another way. By using things that we know, we can derive knowledge about other things. Arthapati is a very interesting one that they always give the example of. Devadatta is fat. So Devadatta is this fat guy. And then they also say that but Devadatta fasts all during the day. So with those 2 pieces of information, we can now deduce that Devadatta must be eating a lot during the night, because if he's fasting during the day and he's fat, he has to be eating sometime. And if he's not eating during the day, then he's eating at night. Anupalabdhi is another one. That's negation. So the non-presence of something is also able to tell us something. So that fact that something does not exist also gives us some kind of positive information. Now, I saved these last 2 because they're really, I think, kind of the most important. So Shabda here means testimony. It doesn't have to be verbal exactly, but texts, books, and of course teachers and other people that know things. That and we would call that testimony, but because you're taking the word of someone else. But this is an amazing way that we all learn things, by reading books, by spending time with our colleagues, by spending time with our teachers. So all of that is important. Now, the last one, and this is really fundamental, and again, also really defines a critical knowledge difference between East and West. Not to draw super stark lines, because the West had plenty of this kind of stuff before, but things got lost through, the last, let's say, 250, 300 years. But pratyaksha, I mean, literally means like, seeing something, like witnessing something, experiencing something. So our perception of things. And the interesting part, and I think most philosophical schools would say, East and West would say, of course, our senses, our ears, our how we see things, smell things, all of that is obviously a way of determining something and gaining knowledge. So the Indian schools will also accept that. But the critical part is that there is a distinction made between, outer pratyaksha, that is through the senses, drawing things in from the outside world and processing them. but we also have a very, very deep and important kind of commitment to inner pratyaksha. That means now the senses are not the main thing. It's just the mind going within consciousness itself. And through that process, we really can derive some amazing knowledge. Now, in the modern scientific world, that is almost like antithetical to what scientific research is. Because he'll say, Are yaar, you went and had your meditation or whatever you did, and you came up with those ideas. This is not some kind of variable scientific fact. This has to be something that's repeatable, testable, all of that. So there is a very interesting kind of epistemological difference with that. And we can discuss this more. But if you really think about pratyaksha, I mean, when I think about especially that inner pratyaksha and believing that as a truth claim, the Buddha is the best example of that. Because Buddha, basically, I mean, one of the last things the Buddha said before he passed away was, don't take anything that I said for granted. I mean, don't just believe what I'm saying. I did this stuff. I had certain experiences. I had certain insights about things. I'm quite happy with that, and I'm sharing that with you. But it is your job to go and test these in the laboratory of your own mind. Or the way Buddha said it was, if you get a piece of gold, how do you know that's really gold? Or how do you know that it's not adulterated with some other metals? You have to go and test its, purity like a goldsmith tests the purity of gold. So in the same way, we have to kind of test all of this knowledge. And that's another important part. Because oftentimes, in terms of the education, oftentimes we talk about, I've heard people say, the Guru Shishya system is not good because there you could just have to accept what the Guru says and just do that. And, for a certain part of the training, specifically in my music training, let us say, that was true. But later on, you have to do your own thing. And every Guru will say, now I've taught you what I know, but you have to make it your own. You have to develop. You have to do your own inner work to develop something. So I think these concepts are really important. So just to summarize, epistemology is ways that we know the world and validate truth. And the main thing that I think India contributes to that is accepting that inner contemplation, inner wisdom, self-knowledge can also be a valid and important source of knowledge. Okay, now we come to probably the key philosophy that I think is really what is going to move us into the discussion of pluralism, and that is Jain principle of anekantavada. So aneka antavada. So not one-sided doctrine. So this is the doctrine of not one side, multiple perspective. I mean, literally, it is talking about pluralism. So the classic example they give is, the blind men who go and see the elephant, and one touches the leg and says, oh, it's like a big tree. One touches the trunk and says, oh, this is a snake. One touches the ear and says, this is a big fan. One touches the tail and says, oh, this is like a rope. So like that, it's an analogy of our own perception of the universe. Means that we are all like kind of blind in that way. We don't have total perception. And it's interesting here, you can see, the gurus are at the top, and you can see that the gurus, they're sending their eyes in all directions. Means multi-perspective is the only way to get at the truth. So the fundamental principle that really Anekantavada teaches us is, fundamentally, no perspective is complete. No one perspective is complete. In fact, it's very even hard to even make the point that multiple perspectives will lead you to the ultimate truth, but multiple perspectives will bring you closer to that. And of course, in Jainism, it's only until you have full Kevala Jnana, like the Jinnas, that you can have this kind of full knowledge, but we're all working in a progressive way. So again, The main point is one view of something or one person's view of something is only going to be a partial view. You can never really have total knowledge of a thing. And the only thing you can do to refine that knowledge is to bring in multiple perspectives and to hear the opinions of others. Okay, now I'll introduce just another very important, this one is from Buddhism. And I think this also is such an important concept to think about because, you know, the world is a very polarized place right now. It's, you know, either you're, I don't know, Congress, BJP, or Republican or Democrat or this or that. And, you know, life is much more complex than two parties. And we all, I think, you know, need to somehow, and I think most people are not fully on one side or the other. They're somewhere kind of in between. But if we can all kind of get more centered, more connected on what we might universally agree upon, fundamentals, then I think we can really grow and allow that pluralism to happen along that spectrum. So Madhyamaka was a philosophy that actually Buddha introduced. And I love this statue of the Buddha that's in Lahore Museum. Is amazing. This was the point when Buddha decided to fast until death. And in the sutta, you can read how he says, you know, I went to touch my belly button and all I could feel was my backbone. And when I went to touch my backbone, all I could feel was my stomach. And, you know, this statue, very powerful statue, depicts that very powerfully. So when he came, of course, then he, you know, Sujata came and gave him the rice, porridge, and then he went back, and then he went to the Bodhi tree and sat down. And after that, and had his enlightenment, his awakening. And then after that, he went back towards Banaras, and he came to Rishipatna, which today is Sarnath. And he met these old bhikkhus, old mendicants that he used to be friends with when he had studied with his old teachers. And this is the first time that the Buddha preaches. This is from the Dharmachakra Pravartana Sutra. This is the first teaching that the Buddha gave. And the first main point he wanted to stress was get away from extremes and get into the center. So he says, mendicants, these two extremes should not be practiced by one who has left the family life. Which are these two? Overindulgence in sensual pleasures, which is contemptible, vulgar, commonplace, dishonorable, and meaningless, and overindulgence in self-mortification, which is painful, dishonorable, and meaningless. By avoiding these extremes, mendicants, the Buddha realized a middle way which gives vision and knowledge and leads to peace, awareness, awakening, freedom. Main point is Buddha was talking about, you know, getting too much involved in pleasurable things is not a good idea. You know, becoming attached to material things a lot, that's not good. Nor is it good to, you know, completely starve yourself and do all sorts of, you know, extreme ascetic practices. But somehow if we could moderate those two and come to the middle, so we're not overly attached to material things, but we have not discarded them, nor are we like completely giving up on society and, you know, kind of disengaging, but being involved. That is the Buddha's Madhyamaka. So again, this idea of not going to extremes, getting to center. Now, what's interesting is Madhyamaka really comes to the fore when you have the development of Mahayana Buddhism, because, you know, the sutta that I just quoted from, of course, that's from the Pali, that's in the Vinaya. No, it's not. It's in the sutras. And this was, you could say, comes out of, well, all Buddhism goes back to the sutras, but this was at an early time, which probably you could say is more closely related to Theravada Buddhism. But what Nagarjuna develops, and others too, but Nagarjuna particularly, one of the great philosophers, is his development of, you know, Mahayana thought vis-a-vis his understanding of what the Madhyamaka way is. And here, again, Nagarjuna is not talking about the same Madhyamaka necessarily that the Buddha was talking about in terms of, you know, how you look. What Nagarjuna was talking about is what he calls the two truths. So the two truths are, one is the conventional truth, so the everyday kind of regular reality that we live in. We have to go to the bathroom, eat, whatever, move around, all of this stuff. And then there's ultimate reality. And I think this is also quite a profound thought, because it allows us to hold two different concepts at the same time. That is to say, yes, I can believe in, the oneness of all reality, which is the ultimate thing. But at the same time, I know that we're different people and we need to accept that difference also to move forward. So there's understanding that there are two levels of reality and that they are not exclusive from each other, but actually function together, is a profoundly important, contribution, again, to not only a philosophical discussion, but how we kind of think about life and move forward. Okay, so now quickly we'll get to these questions, and then I'm going to read some quotes just to get our minds thinking, because all of this stuff that I've been talking about, what does this mean? What does this mean when we're talking about pluralism, and particularly secular pluralism, or secularism versus pluralism? So secularism, as you may know, is the idea that, the function of the state, of the government, of, the way that our, nation functions should be divorced, separated from religious practice. So that sounds like not a bad idea, although I would say that it's very difficult to divorce these things from yourself. I mean, we all have, let's say, a kind of religious background of some kind, whatever we might believe or not. But that, of course, informs our feelings about how the world is and how it reacts. That's what I was saying. All of these thoughts that developed in ancient India are very much deeply ingrained in our systems of thinking. Now, the other world is pluralism, and as Soham mentioned, it's an affirmation of the diversity of religious thought. And what's interesting is, I mean, you all probably know this, like secularism, the word itself wasn't added to the Constitution at the beginning. Ambedkar did not have that in the original, and I think it was after emergency, 77, something like 76, 77, it was added. I think 77 it was ratified, but so a good 30 years later, secularism added, obviously because of things that were happening around that time. But the interesting thing, and I was also learning about this myself when I was thinking about this, was, and someone could write a really wonderful paper, and this is the kind of stuff that I really want students in India to do. Nehru, Gandhi, and Ambedkar were all opposed to the idea of secularism being in the Constitution. And what's interesting about that, because these are three very different thinkers, but they were united in this idea to oppose this idea of secularism. And again, they did this from different reasons. So I think this is another interesting example of, okay, there's one position that seems good, but we all have kind of different points of coming to it. But if we can somehow bring those points together and move forward with that agenda, then hopefully it will serve all of those purposes. I quoted a lot from Buddhism and Jainism, but I just was reminded, this reminds me, even in the Vedas, this is pre-Upanishadic, even in the Vedas, there's a beautiful line, Ekam Sat, Bahuda Vadanti Vipraha. So the truth is one, but people kind of talk about it in different ways, and people might have different concepts to look at it. So this is a really interesting thing, and I'll develop this idea about kind of people who seem like they're coming from different places, but maybe are talking about the same thing. And can we take that pluralism and make it into something that's, productive for us as we move forward? So one big thing underlying all of it is, how do we frame these questions and potential solutions? So one of the, and how do Western concepts work in Indian context? So for example, I mean, the idea of secularism itself, like this separation of religion and state, in fact, was developed first in the state where I live right now, in Rhode Island, by this man called Roger Williams, because the original pilgrims that had moved to Massachusetts area, you know, the Puritans, those guys, they were quite strict and very limited in their like acceptance of other faiths. I mean, other faiths of Christianity even. And so Roger Williams came here and basically said, you can have any religion you want, and this will not affect how we govern ourselves. So that idea really became a critical point for American history. And then, of course, many other countries took it up, as we saw secularism coming up into the Indian Constitution. Now, the problem with that, again, is you have to know about the historical discourse that leads up to the development of that theory. So that came from a place in the West where, you know, there was some very rigid thinking about, you know, a religious state and how it should be run, and one religion kind of governing everything. In India, we never had that. We were pluralistic from the beginning. I mean, there might be some few examples, but by and large, India was a country where people could do whatever they want when it came to religious thought. And what's interesting is that also meant that, you know, the king or whoever was the ruler, they could also freely express their religious thought. So there's a way, I think, that we can have a type of what people might call a secular pluralism, but we don't need the secular part anymore, because the secular part really is an idea that came simply out of a reaction to a Western kind of history. And our inclusion of it is really our reaction to a colonial history, which, again, we have to think about. Because, so here's Gandhi. My notion of democracy is that under it, the weakest shall have the same opportunity as the strongest. No country in the world today shows any but patronizing regard for the weak. Western democracy, as it functions today, is diluted fascism. These are strong words from Gandhi. True democracy cannot be worked by 20 men sitting at the center. These are powerful ideas. And then Ambedkar, on the 26th of January 1950, we're going to enter into a life of contradictions. In politics, we will have equality, and in social and economic life, we will have inequality. In politics, we will be recognizing the principle of one man, one vote, and one vote, one value. In our social and economic life, we shall, by reason of our social and economic structure, continue to deny the principle of one man, one value. How long shall we continue to live this life of contradictions? If we continue to deny it for long, we will do so only by putting our political democracy in peril. And I think we're seeing that, you know, now and everywhere in the world, actually. Okay. Now, the real thing is all of this discussion about pluralism, democracy, our future, my deepest belief is that education is the future for the world. Education is where we should be putting our emphasis, and we are certainly not doing enough in India. And that would be really an important place for us to, you know, put our resources. And I think, again, a Churchill quote, I love this quote, and I think it's very correct. The empires of the future are the empires of the mind. Empires of the mind. And, you know, for a large part, the Indian social consciousness today is still a colonized mind. We need to decolonize our mind. And, you know, a lot of this talk about democracy, globalism, what actually the most overriding principle that is defining us now is capitalism. And there are a lot of issues with capitalism that we have to think about. And I think that is part of the education. Some Gandhi quotes and then some Ambedkar quotes. What is really needed to make a democracy function is not knowledge of facts, but right education. So there has to be something behind a kind of knowledge base that comes, and a type of education that makes a democracy work. If you have an uneducated, connected, engaging type of populace, then you run into lots of problems with your democracy. And this is the kind of thing Gandhi was talking about in terms of education. Literacy in itself is no education. Literacy is not the end of education or even the beginning. By education, I mean all around drawing out of the best in the child and man in body, mind, and spirit. So education, again, like I was saying at the beginning, it's not just a thing. It's a dynamic way of being. And that's, really the greatest thing of the guru system is, yes, you learn whatever you learn from your guru, music, this thing, that thing, anything. But really, you're really learning about how to be a human being, how to carry yourself, how to move forward in life in all aspects. So a holistic education is what we really need. So here's Ambedkar again, same kind of ideas. The progress of any society depends on the progress of education in that society. And I think education in the last budget got reduced. I mean, I can't comprehend how we're reducing our education budget. We need to put way more money in education. That is really the future of things. Using your knowledge only to pass the exam will not be enough. We should use our knowledge for the betterment and progress of our brothers and sisters. Only then will India prosper. And this relates very much to the capitalist part I was talking about. I mean, everyone, these IITs, bids, all, everyone's, pretty much, not everyone, but most people, and I'm not saying it's bad, but we have to investigate, is just going to make a lot of money and do well, but there's not so much of that giving back to our community. That is a really important thing I think we can develop in India. In fact, I wanted to put in a proposal that everyone who gets a government education, like an IIT, let's say, should do at least 1 year or 2 years even of teaching in public schools. I think that would be an amazing thing. I think it would be good for the student. I think it would be good for the students of that student. I think it would be good for the country, and I think it would really change our perspective of what progress and contribution are. So, last quote: you've got educated doesn't mean everything is done. There is no doubt in the importance of education, but along with education, morality should also improve. Without morality, the value of education is zero. And we find a certain impoverishment of our values, and we're seeing that everywhere in the whole world. So I really feel like a strong base in education, which is based in a holistic kind of way of teaching and sharing knowledge and sharing experience, with a type of development of the body also and the spirit, are all critical to our future as we move forward. So that's all I wanted to say. These are the books that I've written. I'm working on another one. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't speak too much or too fast. And let us have another 2-minute Shanti. Let everything settle down. And you can formulate your questions. And then, Soham, I guess you'll moderate the questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So here we go. Okay, thank you, everyone. So, floor is all yours.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for the talk. I found some points very interesting, like the one you told on secularism. At Indic Club, our work is one point of our work is to work on decoloniality. So the thing you told that Indian secularism is a response to the colonialism. So I found it very enlightening, and I think we will, as in Indic Club, we will work on the topic more. Okay. So further, we have some questions. Uh, Pluralism is a central topic, and it usually needs a lot of understanding and perspective. So while reading different things on culture and history, we came across some questions, and I would like to ask them to you.
Yeah.
So the first question is: in the history of European state formation, we see centralization of power and sovereignty, whereas in pre-colonial India, the society was seen as prior to the state and independent of it, unlike European state formation. The ruler's duty was to protect and uphold the customs and laws of the social groups. This had a significant contribution to India's approach to pluralism. What do you think is the reason of this difference in the process of state formation, and hence in the stance that the European nations and India in its past took towards pluralism, their stance towards pluralism between India and European nations?
Okay, that's a very interesting and deep question. So I think, I mean, even Europe, they lived in a kind of multilingual, multicultural world also for a long time. And the real rise of the nation state and that concept, I think a lot comes out of, not exactly the Enlightenment, but things that were leading up to the Enlightenment and the philosophies that were leading up to that. And really, I mean, prior to the kind of Enlightenment period, it's really about science. And, this might sound harsh, but I have to critique the scientific system in this. And as I was saying, in our epistemologies, we can accept shastras and scientific research, but we also accept other types of knowledge. So even in that system, it was in a way a type of reaction to their own Western history. So if you had in medieval times, let us say, the church, like the Pope, he was he was above the kings, Then the kings say, oh, no, we don't want this guy over here. We want to have our own thing, that kind of stuff. And part of that was also due to people saying, well, this religion is, one thing, but there's a lot of superstitions. What we're developing now is science. This is fact. This is universal. This applies to everybody. And so those types of philosophies were moving along. Now, why states got formed, again, is all a matter of historical perspective. Maybe in 200 years, we won't have states and countries anymore. It's very possible. It's very possible. Why do we have to have passports and visas and all this? Who knows? It could happen. The idea of a state is a very young idea. So what I'm really saying is the differences, I feel it's all about the histories that came before that made that happen. So in India, again, it was that pluralism that, we didn't have to, science, shastric type of work was going on just as much as spiritual work was going on, just as much as any other kind of knowledge, acquisition was going on, and people kept, their regional ideas. And we had periods of empires, we had the Mauryan Empire, we had Gupta Empire, we had the Mughals, we had different empires coming and going, and they're all just going to come and go. But somehow India, the essence of it stays. I mean, that's really the beauty of India. And we have to kind of retrieve that. So that's one thing. Historical context makes a huge difference. Now, the real thing is, we also have to accept our own history. Yes, we were colonized by the British for 250 years. So, And again, I don't like the idea of colonialism. I don't think that should have happened, but TK, you have to accept it happened. And we can't also say that everything that happened because of that is bad, because there are also some good things that happen with that. So as we do this decolonizing work, we have to think about, well, there are probably some good things that came out during that colonizing thing, and there are good influences that we could get, and we should take the good and leave the bad. And that's really important. Again, that's part of the pluralism. Like, just because it's a British idea doesn't make it a bad idea. And also the pluralism is to see that we have faults in ourselves that we need to improve and become better about. So having all of that in mind, I think, is important. But the just to finish up, so the histories of the kind of state are different, and the fact that we basically decided that we wanted to be a state, a nation, a democracy, these were all things under debate. I mean, Gandhi did not see the future of India like this at all. You know, a lot of people would think Gandhi's crazy, though. Gandhi says everyone should go and live in the village and grow food. I think that would be amazing. But people don't want to do that, you know? So the funny thing about this, the state and all of that is we again get polarized. It's either, you know, we need to go back to living in villages, or we need to be like a Western nation. I mean, that in a way, like, you could say that Gandhi and Nehru almost created extremes of thought in that sense. I mean, Gandhi was really like, we need to retreat back into our own culture, get away from this industrialization, westernization. Whereas Nehru was like, "Are yaar, our culture is amazing, but we need to be a world power, like on par with all the other great nations of the world, because we're like that, and we need to modernize, industrialize, do all these things." So, and you know, obviously Nehru won out on that debate, and that's where we are in the future and then present. So balancing all of those things as we move forward, I think, is important. And I think, just to finally to wrap up, I think that state question that you ask is also a question that many nation states in Europe are now asking themselves. Like, why is this a problem? Why is this not working for us? It's because they're becoming more multicultural, more, you know, in their own makeup. So, for example, like, you know, the idea of the nation was to say, this is us. We are France, and we have one language, French language, and we have one flag, and we have one this, and we are united. And then this guy over here, I'm German, and I have one language. But that was also, you know, that was destroying a type of pluralism that all of those nations had. So now that we've picked up that nation idea, we're struggling to figure that out. Look, we don't even have a national language for that reason. We only have 2 official languages. We couldn't agree on that. Now that's great. That's part of what makes India amazing, is that it's functioning like this democracy, but still fighting against certain notions of the totalizing nature of the state. Okay, I talked way too much. Sorry.
No, thank you, sir. Very good answer. Thank you. It cleared my question. I got the answer. Okay.
Yeah.
So next question is, it is about one of your books. In an interview on your book on Raja Krishnadev Rai, you told that in that book you re-evaluate the persistent notion that Vijayanagar was a staunchly Hindu state which was in valiant opposition to the onslaught of Islam.
Right.
And you explain this thought in quite much depth in the 5th chapter in the same book. The chapter is named Bijapur and the Sultans.
Yeah.
Can you explain that point here?
Yeah. So again, I think the basic history, if you read the old histories, and even if you read Robert Sewell's translation of Portuguese Chronicles and his very excellent introduction to all of that, basically you get the idea that Islam was coming and taking over, and there was this one place left that was a Hindu state that was fighting Islam. And that, if you really just read the history, is not true. And if you read the book, I mean, I make it clear that, yes, people were anti-Islamic, and there were people that were anti-Hindu, but there were people that were anti-Shaiva and anti-Vaishnava, and anti-Jain, So what I'm really getting at is, if you look at that history as just like, we're a Hindu state and this is a Muslim state coming after us, then you've destroyed all the complexity of that whole situation, and you've like reduced, the pluralistic and non-committedly religious nature of an Indian empire or an Indian state into something that was so. Nobody in Krishnadeva Raya's time would ever say, I'm a Hindu state. This is all stuff that came after, when historians wrote about these things. And of course, I can understand, some of these thoughts. Well, some of them came from the British themselves, but many of those feelings that the British had were also driven by their desire to control India. And the way to control any state is to divide it. Part of decolonizing is to realize that the great division that we find between Hindus and Muslims in India today is also derived from a legacy of colonialism, not necessarily a legacy of our own history prior to that. No, I'm not saying that there wasn't violence done on both sides and that there are issues to deal with. What I'm saying is, if you look at history in that lens only, you are limiting yourself to the kind of complexity of the situation. And in this explicit way, you're actually like reading other things into history that were not there. That's a big problem. And really, the only way that you can really know this stuff is if you read the literature. And that's the biggest problem. Nobody's reading literature, old literature. Nobody is doing it. Now I have to give a little plug here. Like, all this education, all these brilliant minds in India, why don't we have people studying Sanskrit, studying Telugu, Tamil, Gujarati, Punjabi, whatever? Why is it that if I want to find a good study on an old, whatever, Marathi poet, I have to go to a guy in America and Europe? I know, see, this all has to do, again, with colonialism. It's like this feeling we still have of, yes, I want to be good, I want to make money, I want to be successful. What's the point of this Indian old Marathi stuff? That's nice, you can do it on the side, but why would you ever want to do that? This is what we need to change in our country. It's happening. I'm feeling, even the last 20 years, I felt a big change. People going to other fields outside of engineering. So anyway, I went off on a tangent, but basically what I'm saying is, it's a very myopic view of history, and also a type of history that reads too much into it, our own feelings. And that's why I really feel like reading the primary sources is so essential. And when you read those sources, you'll find out that, there was definitely some antagonism, but it was really no different than the kind of antagonism that Krishnadeva, I talked about in the book. Like, his biggest rival was the Gajapati. That's the guy he really hated the most. Bijapur and those guys, in I think maybe three or four generations before Raya, there was a marriage alliance between Bijapur and Vijayanagara. So, all of this stuff was going, it's much more complex than we give credit to. Okay.
Thank you, sir. And continuing to your point on the reading the original sources, I recommend everyone to read the book because it refers to many sources from both the sides. It refers to the Persian histories like Tariq-e-Farishta and others, and also the court epics written in Telugu itself. So the book refers to them a lot. I went through the book, and I recommend everyone to read it.
I'll just mention one thing about the book too. I got a lot of hate mail for the book. A lot of hate mail. I still read sometimes just to read it. The most worst language this Telugu speaking guy wrote to me and just said, "You're horrible. You've destroyed everything. You love Muslims. You all of this stuff." And I understand there are definitely people that don't want to hear that. But again, unless you do the research yourself, then come and debate with me. Because otherwise, and this is the biggest problem in our world right now, is just getting knowledge from, NDTV or Twitter, Gitters, and all these. This is not healthy. Go and read books that people spent, years and decades, then come and talk. This is the biggest problem right now with knowledge. It's you just pick this stuff up and then everyone thinks, oh, this is it. And then the worst part is Twitter knows that, Facebook knows that, and they send you exactly what you want. And this is what has created the greater polarization is social media, because it allows people to stay in their side of it, and it does not foster dialogue.
Yeah, right. I agree. Now the third question is related to the future of Indian pluralism. So, according to a research by Pew Research Center, according to a survey by them, 53% of the Indians view their country's religious diversity as an asset rather than a liability. But at the same time, with few exceptions, India's major religious groups perceive more differences than similarities between their communities. So they find the different major religious communities find themselves quite separate from others. These seem to be two contradicting things to me. So how do you think these things can be accommodated in a multicultural India? And how do you see pluralism in India going forward with time?
Right. Great question. Well, first is I'm always worried about Pew Research studies, because who they're giving these questions to is also a certain kind, really, because look, again, here's another perfect example. This is the West coming and using us now. Here's how we're still colonized. We're still colonized because we're still the laboratory for the social sciences of the West. They want to understand India. They want to do graphs on us. They want to do all this stuff on us. If TK out, go ahead and do it. No issue. My question is, why aren't we doing that more for ourselves? We are, but we should be doing it more. And hell, why don't we go to Europe and do some analysis of their countries? We should do that, but we're not doing that, right? So that's one thing. But okay, let's go with these numbers. 53% say it's an asset. So more than if we're in a democracy as we're in, then we win. So more people think it's an asset, but people think it's very different. That does seem contradictory, but in fact, I think it's the heart of what pluralism is. Pluralism is all about, it's a very hard thing. That's the thing. It's not easy to be pluralistic because it takes two things. It takes conviction in what you believe and clarity about your own thought. And the second part is you have to be able to tolerate and accept something that you hate. That's the true meaning of pluralism. There are certain things in my heart of hearts I don't like at all. I just don't like, I don't believe in them. But, I can't impose that on anybody else. And no matter how much I don't like that, I have to accept this because that's this guy's freedom. Right? And we can discuss when those freedoms come in conflict and what that means. But, this is, so being very different, I think, is actually critical to the development of true pluralism. So it's a good question and an important thing to think about. Again, the two truths. It's like the ultimate truth you have is, yes, I believe everyone is entitled to everything. Everything is true and wonderful. And then there's our conventional reality. Like, I can't stand that guy. That guy is pissing me off every day when he does this or does that, Or I don't like this, or I don't believe in this. I think it's immoral, whatever you think. What? We have to put those two together and say, TK, I do believe in my heart of hearts that everyone does have their opinion. But I also have to see that even though I don't like it, I have to kind of, tolerate. I don't like that word so much, but accept or whatever. Now, that is the true test of pluralism, is to tolerate the thing that you don't like, but still value that person as an individual with their own rights. That's the true test. And that's why, there's one of those quotes, a lot of the pluralism that we say we practice is not really pluralism at all. It's a very fake kind of pluralism.
Yeah. Thank you, sir, for the answer. Uh, Now I'd like to pass on the mic to Ahan. He will ask the questions from the our audiences.
Okay. Okay, Ahan,
Um,
please.
yeah, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
So one of the questions we have received from the audience is, can the dharmic way of government mentioned in different nitis and shastras, where the meritorious have more power, but at the same time also more responsibilities and severe punishments and expected to give back to the community through dhan dharma without compulsion of the state, be a way of madhyamika to the extremes of communism and capitalism?
Wow, I feel like I need to read that. Is that a question in the chat somewhere?
Uh, I would have to put that in the chat, sir.
Uh,
Just a second.
or
Uh,
yeah, there was a lot.
yeah,
What is the basic question? You can rephrase.
yeah. I can't comprehend it. It's too long.
That's it. Paste, cut it up. Cut and paste that one. I'll look at it.
Yeah. Before that, like there's a short one here. Is it right to say that pluralism in its distilled form is in contrast to secularism as we see it today?
Is pluralism in its distilled form? In a way, I think yes, because for example, the secularism argument again because of historical reasons, but whatever. I mean, those reasons somewhat exist in India too. But secularism, in a way, was basically saying no religion. We don't want to hear about it. We don't want to think about it. We don't want you doing anything. You can't have a Christmas tree on a public space because that's a public space. So there's no religion allowed there. So secularism takes you into that direction, whereas pluralism would say, "Hey, you want to put a Christmas tree? Okay, that's fine. You want to put a whatever, a Ganesh idol? Okay. You want to put a cross? Okay." Like everyone could put something in the. So in a way, they are like almost like totally diametrically opposed. One is saying the public space is for everyone, or let us say the public space is for the expression of all religions, which is pluralism, let's say. Whereas the other side would say public space should have no religion. So in a way, yeah, I would kind of agree.
Yeah, sir.
Yes. Next one.
Yeah. So the previous question I've put it in the chat.
Okay. Let me read it. Can the dharmic way of government mentioned in different nitis and shastras, where the meritorious have more power, but at the same time also more responsibilities to imperial and expected to give back to the community through dana dharma, be a way of madhyamaka to the extremes of communism and capitalism? Not sure. The premise is not clear to me of the meritorious have more power, but at the same time also more responsibilities and severe punishments and expected to give back to the community. Dana dharma. I'm not sure what that means, but let me say, if that the person who wrote that question can engage directly, that's good. Or I think understand what this is like. People with, like, in a capitalist system, you're going to have vast differentials in income. It's just part of how capitalism works, and that's what we're feeling right now. The biggest problem with capitalism is gross inequality that we're seeing all around the world. So that's one thing. In a communist system, you're going to have, again, like a kind of more equalized level of income. But maybe that also doesn't inspire people to kind of work hard or produce more, and it doesn't have that competitive spirit of capitalism. So is there a way to kind of get to center? I don't know about the meritorious have more power, but I think like socialist democracies are kind of moving in that direction. For example, states and nations that basically say all healthcare, all education, all basic services are free. Now, in America, it is certainly not like that. India was a little bit like that, but not exactly either. And what scares me about India is that we're moving more towards an American system more and more. With, now we have all this privatized hospitals, privatized schools, all of that is creating certain things. But what, in regard to this question, though, I mean, the greatest thing we can do, I mean, Ambani doesn't need 30 floors, man. You can have five floors is enough, 10 floors is enough. Those 20 floors that you build, why didn't you just build a school and do all these things? Because, look, we're in Kali Yuga. See, our Shastras taught us all these things. They knew about everything. Kali Yuga is there. This greed, lobha, is at a maximum right now. And what scares me about all of young people, and I understand it, but why this desire for so much money? It will never bring you happiness. Guaranteed. That's what every Shastra says, and it's true. But of course, the only people that ever say that are people with money. So it's also because when you don't have money and you don't have things, you want things, and that's very natural, and I understand that. But if there can be a little bit of a limit on just the insanity of wealth that you see in India, then I think we'd have been in a lot better position, and we wouldn't have the insanity of poverty that we still have in our country. So I think a middle way, yes, would be to put like a income tax or income cap on rich people. I don't know if they're meritorious, but they certainly just have more money. So I don't know. It's a tough question to answer because I'm not exactly sure, but these are some of my ideas. Is the video coming out okay? It looks like it might not be connected to the video as well, but as long as the video is okay, then.
So there's a lag.
Yeah, but you can hear the audio, okay?
Yeah.
The audio is
okay.
Fine. Well, you don't need to look at me; just hear me. Someone raised their hand.
Hello,
Ankit.
sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much for your talk. It was really enlightening. And I think the topic of today's discussion was also really relevant because thing is, we are all getting into college right now. We're all freshers. I think most of us are. And we're all going to be encountering a number of different people of different cultures. So I think it's really relevant, the topic. And the question I'm trying to get at is what exactly is cyclical time? Because we are used to a notion that time goes in one direction because of all the things that we experience in our daily lives. So I want to know what your take on cyclical time is.
So cyclical time also moves in one direction. It never goes backwards. So you never the circle is always moving. Whatever you wanted to go that way or this way, it doesn't matter. But it's always moving in one direction. So it is, linear in that sense, but it's cyclically linear. So it's always repeating upon itself. Whereas the Western concept is basically like, we're going to go and go and go and go and go. And it's just like kind of moving forward. There's never a kind of coming back. And I think that's, one of the issues. So the other thing with cyclical time, I think that's really important. And I think this is probably where I would say like karma theory is one of the great theories of history, is that, one of the biggest quandaries that the Western religions deal with is, why do, good things happen to bad people? And why do bad things happen to good people? I did everything good in my life. I treated everyone nicely, and all this tragedy happened in life. Whereas this fellow was the worst fellow, cheater fellow, doing all bad things, and this guy became, famous millionaire or whatever, crorepati. How is that possible? They don't have a really good answer for that. Because one life. Western system is all about one life. That's the other thing that comes with linear time too, is there's no reincarnation. It's just you are you. Soham is Soham, Ahan is Ahan, Ankit is Ankit, Srinivas is Srinivas. You live, you're born, you live, die, bas ho gaya, that's it. and that's it, one life. And with you, all of that good and bad also dies. Now, our systems don't work like that at all. It doesn't even make sense. Nothing just leaves. That karmic action has its fruition sometime in the future, because we don't believe in just one life. We believe in a continuity of lives. So that karma maybe not be felt in this life, maybe not even felt in some other next life. It could be many generations down the line that karma reaches its fruition. And this is, not a perfect way of explaining everything, but it's a system of understanding that actions and lifetimes are actually, they're related, but they're not always linked to each other. An action can happen in this life and have its repercussions in the next life. The reasons why you were born to your parents at that time with your features and your proclivities is all because of some past karmas. That's the reasoning. So cyclical time allows us to see beyond a singular life and to see ourselves actually as part of one bigger life. That's why we have Jivatma and Paramatma. So that Jivatma, it's there, but it's Jiva. It's contained in that one person. But that Jivatma is also part of and essential and inherent in Paramatma. So like that, these things move on, and these concepts simply don't exist in the East, because they don't have the idea of cyclical time, which leads to basically the idea of rebirth. And if you really look at, even science, when a plant dies, when an animal dies, do they disappear? No. That plant breaks down, that becomes the soil. The animal maybe is eaten by some vultures or something, it's food, then it breaks down, then it becomes part of the soil, then the soil becomes part of the plant, then we come and eat that plant. So this is the cyclical nature of the universe. So these things that the rishis and sages taught us about cyclical time, when I think about it now, I feel like it's truth. I haven't found anything that has pushed me against that, let us say. Anyway, I hope that helped with the question.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. And one follow-up question, sir. Does this trace back to the concept of yuga?
Sorry, does this go back to the concept of yoga? Was that the question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And that's what's great is the yoga system. Again, there's a progression. There's a way. There's a down part of the cycle, and there's an up part of the cycle, and it brilliantly laid out. And the earlier cycles, the earlier yugas are longer, and then like dharma on its the Kamadhenu on its 4 legs, every leg is going away. So right now, Papa, and sadly, we're with a cow with only 1 leg left. Can't even stand. It's falling down. And next pralaya is coming. No doubt about it. It is a given. You're seeing it right now. Kali Yuga, this climate change business, all this stuff going on, war, famine, so much war everywhere. For me, again, Shastra said it all. Kali Yuga is very clear to me. And Pralaya is coming is very clear to me. And I think if you really ask any scientist or any person, I'd be hard-pressed to find someone that would really disagree. And just to make a point about the yugas, or what that means is, we would see this as a natural extension of how things work, or a natural cycle of how things work. For example, now in climate change and the discourse on climate change, and this is again part of the very heavily westernized concepts that we Indians have also picked up, and they're like kind of part of how we function too. And the whole idea is this: oh, well, let's create electric cars, let's create this thing, let's do this thing. Are yaar, all you need to do is stop doing all the bad behavior that you're doing for that problem. I mean, it's like someone with diabetes. Diabetes is a disease that you can manage in many cases with diet and exercise. But the doctor doesn't say you should really, stop cutting down. You should cut down on those sweets, and you should cut down on whatever fatty foods, and you should exercise more. They might say that. The person doesn't do it. What do? They take insulin every day. So what I'm saying is like, that's what I was saying about solutions, Western solutions. These are all types of a type of symptom-based solution attitude. Again, totally derived from an idea of like linear time, but everything's just progressing and getting better. So our new technology is going to make it better. Whatever we do, Mother Nature is more strong than us. No doubt about that. And pralaya is coming, like I'm saying. So if you really want to do something, though, we have to stop behaving in the way that we do. We have to stop using all these fossil fuels the way we do. It's not about having more electric cars. It's about using cars less. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but it's true. I mean, that's the only. Or like a thing that I feel very strongly about is vegetarianism, or even veganism, actually. I mean, most of this climate change is because of the shit and farts of cows. And yet, so much of this world still eats beef and drinks milk. So it's like there's so much we could do. But in a way, we're not going to do that. And in a way, even if we did some of those things, it's not going to change the real reality that pralaya is coming anyway. So this is something we also just have to accept, I think. So I think, personally, I think Yuga system is excellent.
Thank you so much for your answers.
Yeah, Ankit, I don't know. I'm talking a lot with you guys.
No, sir, it was really
thank you.
interesting.
Okay, bye, Sanidhya. Yes, or you're, hello? Go ahead, Amma. Sanidhya, you had a question?
And it was really nice talk and
Sanidhya,
giving
your voice is quite
more.
robotic. Can you type your question out in the chat box?
Okay.
Yeah. Ahan, was there any other question in the meantime?
Yeah, I've put it in the chat box also. I'll read it out. You talked about pramanas. They're essentially tools which help us get closer to truth. Can you elaborate on the difference between pratyaksha and shabda? And is one of them a faster way to the truth, or is it subjective?
Okay, great question. So all the pramanas are available to us, and all should be used to refine knowledge over time. So shabda, going to granthas, texts, or going to your gurus, very important, very good. But just as important, I would say, is pratyaksha. So developing your skills of observation and then inner skills of contemplation. That's why I'm a big, even this 2-minute chanti, that's a type of contemplation, like going inside. So I think neither one is faster in and of itself. Both are important. And like you said, it is kind of subjective. Like some people respond really well to reading books, whereas other people really need like a teacher to kind of help them. Like I was like that. I'm not very good at just mugging something up and doing the test. But if someone teaches me, then I like it. At the same time, some people, or even take shabda take pratyaksha, for example. What happens to a guy if he's deaf, dumb, and blind? His abilities to have that inner sensory are going to be, different, and they're going to be limited compared to someone else. But maybe they develop an inner pratyaksha more. So yes, it's very subjective. It all depends on who you are, your own propensities, your own likes, dislikes. But in terms of the path, I would say both are essential. Both are, especially Shabdam Pratyaksha, both are essential. And particularly in regard to Pratyaksha, the inner Pratyaksha is really important, inner insight. I mean, that's what Mahavira, Jinnah, Buddha, all the great Munis, Rishis, that's what they were doing. And that was true knowledge. Good question.
Sanidhya, can you can you type out your question?
Yeah, actually, the chat was like, it's not, the chat box is not
Okay.
available, so I'll just speak it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you got your
This is here.
whenever there's a discussion about spiritual or ancient writings, people often mention like one or two beautiful ideas, and then that's it. And one of the things that I consider very important with regards to reading something is that I haven't really read it if it hasn't changed my behavior. And so, because you are someone who has read so many ancient writings and all, book recommendations that you can give me that will actually change my decisions about the material world and the steps that I'm going to take.
Yeah. So recommendations for books, is I just missed that one little bit there.
Yes, recommendations.
Recommendations for books that would really like change the way you live and behave. That's what you're saying? That's what you're asking?
Change his decisions on the material things.
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Change your decisions on material things. Well, I mean, here's a perfect example relating back to the previous question. Book is important, but teacher is also important. And your own meditation is, I think, probably the most important and the least emphasized in our world today. Although, of course, now mindfulness is this amazing, fancy thing that everyone likes. But Ariyad, we had mindfulness in 500 BC. Buddha talked about mindfulness all the way back then. So a book about materialism, and well, you know, there's this one book. You want to read an interesting book. It's a big book, but I really found it to be incredibly fascinating. And that's a book called The Dawn of Everything. Have you heard of this book? It's a big book, but it's very interesting. And it just talks about humanity, society, how we've evolved, some things about democracy that we were talking about. And I think that's a good one. I mean, there's so many. I mean, the other thing, again, like in the previous question, it's subjective. Like, even what we get from knowledge from a book, you know, we're still influenced by what our parents think, what our parents want, or this thing and that thing. So it's complicated. So I would say, so that's one to start. Just read that. The other thing I would really say is read Hind Swaraj. It's an easy book. Every Indian should read that book. You can like it, you can dislike it, great, but you should definitely read it. 100% that should be on the bestseller list always. And it's easy and short. So Hind Swaraj, and you read what Gandhi says about education in that. Fantastic, man. So Dawn of Everything, Hind Swaraj, and oh, no, what's another good? I mean, for example, like I read the Bhagavad Gita like all the time. Right? Whatever religious faith you have, pick up one of those books. But I read it all the time because one reading means it's not going to do anything. You have to read these works 100 times because there's that much depth in those things. And really what's happening, and this is the brilliance of a good book, is what that good book is doing, that's actually developing that inner pratyaksha. Matlab, you have to, I read this verse 100 times, but it has to do, it's like a maturation of in the mind. It's fermenting in the mind, and that takes years. And then suddenly, 10 years after I read that verse, 1,000 times after I read that verse, tuck, it'll come to me. Now, that only came because I did the reading over and over and again. Even though it didn't change me the first time, it didn't change me the 100th time, but that 1000th time, that's when the change happened. So read good books that you know are good, and stay with them. And in a way, you can't expect change. Real change takes time, and it'll take a longer period than maybe just finishing the book. But I understand what you're getting at, and I think that The Dawn of Everything would be a really good one.
Thank you so much. I'll make sure I read those.
Yeah. Abhi Sharma. Go ahead.
Hello, sir. I had this question. What are the implications of having secular pluralism in a society which has loosely organized Indic as well as indigenous faith systems? Doesn't the term secularism carry its own heavy baggage of being a product of Western political thought and also being a reaction to the Christian state interference? Do we really need another ism which has originated in the Western consciousness to auto-colonize our intellectual space? Nothing against pluralism or non-interference of religion as such.
I mean, I think I pretty much agree with everything you said. Are you saying that you don't want secularism in there, you just prefer pluralism, or you don't want to have any of that in there?
No, nothing against pluralism or the indica or indigenous forms of pluralism, but you use the epithet secular with it, which carry its own baggage, which it is another ism which has originated in the Western consciousness. It originated in the Western context.
Yeah. So that's exactly what I was saying. That secularism was inserted into the Constitution later. People didn't like the idea to begin with, and it was inserted it was inserted at a particular time in Indian history. But the point is that, yes, it's a totally Western concept that was completely based, as I said, in a reaction to the kind of puritanical roots that really came out of American colonialism. But yes, I totally agree with you. I think if I had to pick between secularism and pluralism, like I said, I think pluralism is more open. Secularism has a restrictive kind of nature to it, whereas pluralism is like, do whatever you want, it doesn't matter. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I don't know if you heard me talking about that in the talk, but that's basically what I said, what you were just saying.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Devraj.
Namaste, Professor. My question was that if there are certain books, certain texts which have different interpretations by different authors, which are somewhat contradictory in nature, then how do we verify which one of them is the actual truth and the message conveyed by the original author?
Okay, so there's a text, and two people are commenting on the text. Is that and how do you reconcile these things?
Yes, sir. For example, a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita describes Sri Krishna as supreme, and another says that the supreme is speaking through Krishna, him being a normal person. So how do we verify which one of these is the actual message conveyed by Ved Vyasa, the original compiler of the Gita?
Right. So this is a perfect example of pluralism and how it works at an intellectual level. What I was trying to get at the beginning of the talk is knowledge is not a discrete entity. Like, this is the problem. Like, our education system, which we basically picked up from the British about 250 years ago as industrialization happened, that system is all about mug this up, question one, A, B, C, D, you have to pick and there's a discrete right answer. We need to move away from the idea that there's a discrete right answer. There's not one right answer in any of these questions. I mean, like you said, perfect example, Bhagavad Gita has been commented on by all great scholars. Let us say even even within Vaishnavism, let's say all three, Madhva, Shankara, and Ramanuja, all wrote commentaries on Bhagavad Gita, and all three of them have totally different, not totally different, but often different interpretations of the verse. So who's right? The point is nobody's right, and everybody's right. And if you can understand what that means, then that becomes a powerful thing. So in one school of thought, Krishna is, Mahavishnu is Avatara, fully there. In another tradition, they might hold that, Krishna is a man and God is speaking through him. That's fine. These are all, again, this is like the elephant is the Bhagavad Gita, and, the people are holding the different things. Now, the Bhagavad Gita itself, or Vedavyasa, if you want to say, didn't have an agenda about which one of those interpretations was correct. That's the beauty of a sacred text, is a sacred text gives you a plurality of options, a plurality of meanings. And it begs of us, please interpret me as you wish, because that's the power of this text. And that's why we have so many commentaries, so many ones. So there's no right one. Everyone is right in their own way. And the main thing now that you have to decide is, which one resonates with me? Which one do I feel attracted to? Like you might say, I really like this idea, this Avatara stuff doesn't make sense. How can God come down? But a human being can be really inspired. I like that interpretation. Or maybe someone, you might say the opposite. You might say, no, I believe, Sri Krishna is Avatara of Mahavishnu, came from Vaikuntha, and that's it. God's God on earth. And that's what I believe. So then you go deep into that tradition and you develop that. Then maybe later on, you might find that something in that tradition that you're going into, you also disagree with. And you're like, I liked a lot of this, but I disagreed. So in the end, we're all developing our own thing. And again, that relates back to that inner pratyaksha. You have to let these things meditate and go deep into you. Does that sound okay, Devraj? Or a follow-up question?
Sir, not exactly a follow-up. I wanted to, I think I found a better way to rephrase my question. What I actually wanted to ask was that some text was written thousands and thousands of years ago, and the author wanted to convey a certain message through that text. Now, throughout the ages, different people have received it and have propagated it themselves to their students. How do we know that the original meaning that was being trying to conveyed by the author is the one in the text we're reading?
Well, again, even the author might not have a specific intended idea. Maybe they did. Let's say they did. Okay, let's go with that. Let's say the author wanted something to be read in a certain way. Okay. But that's the nature of knowledge. When the author wrote it, they might have had, a certain idea about what it was about. But a text, again, is not a fixed, like I was saying in the very beginning, knowledge is not a fixed thing. Knowledge is an organic, dynamic, living thing. So that text is going to grow and people are going to interpret it in different ways. If you want to try to go back to what the original author meant, who's to say? I mean, one guy says this is the true meaning of the author. The other guy says, no, this is the true meaning of. So we won't know what that true meaning is at all. So there's no way to say that one is more true to the original or the original author's intent. I mean, of course, we could get into some historical discussion, scholarly discussion about how those ideas could be developed. But overall, I would say, no. And if you're talking about spiritual texts, I mean, particularly if you're talking about Vedas, Upanishads, I mean, they're very different. I mean, Vedas especially. The Vedas are full of metaphors that are very difficult to understand, even at a literal level, and can be interpreted in so many different ways. So unless the author states very clearly, and this was never a big thing in Indian literature until much later, you don't have a clear idea of what someone actually believes to be the intent of a work. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. It was a beautiful explanation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Last one. No more?
I guess, sir, that is it. We would like to thank everyone for participating in this talk, and we would like to end the Q&A session here. Sir, we would like to request you to request 10 minutes of your time so that you can talk to our club members.
Oh, yeah,
So,
sure. Yeah, you mentioned that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, we as our club, the Indic club, is trying to establish a culture for subjects such as pluralism within a largely
Mm-hmm.
technological campus. And since,
Mm-hmm.
sir, you also belong to, you are currently posted at IIT Gandhinagar. So being a technological campus where mostly students of our age are generally concerned about things such as coding or finance or consultancy, there's a lot of disinterest when it comes to subjects such as colonialism, and people aren't generally interested. So we wanted to seek your guidance about how should we go about promoting such topics and engaging people, making going about Indic a renaissance in a technological campus.
Right. That's a great question. Well, two things. One, having I taught at IIT for, I was just there last month, but 7 years in a stretch, and the amazing thing that I found was, yes, there was definitely some people that because of, for example, all the students had to take, all the first years had to take world history with me, and there were definitely some students that thought this was the biggest waste of time and silly that we had to do this. But there were more students who felt, oh, this is fantastic. This is what we should be learning. I wish we had more time to do this, but I have to do 10 papers or mug up something or take these exams. And we don't have time, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, I know what you're saying there. It's a little bit hard, but I think there's a kind of a deep interest there also. So how do you ignite that interest? So I think one thing, you have to make things fun and interactive. And in a way, you kind of, when you're trying to build these things, I don't like doing these things, but in a way, you have to be kind of savvy in a way. So, maybe you can have a talk on finance in ancient India, or Chanakya's rules of economic trade or something. Maybe or maybe you do a class on Paninian grammar and how it led to coding. Invite someone to talk about that. So get them involved in that way. Or maths and Indian maths is super exciting stuff, old Indian maths. So that's one way. So the topics, I think you can do. Another one that I think is really great is organizing debates. This gets people really excited. So you invite 2 good speakers that you like, or 2, good students that you like to be the kind of main debaters. And you have a proposition and you go through the debate, and then you bring in the audience to have discussion. And that can be very exciting. And, if there is a little tension, which is good, you have to have tension. If there's no tension, there's no growth, So if you have a little tension, that's good. And you need a good moderator to kind of, make sure it doesn't get, mean spirited or anything. But that, when the audience sees that tension, they get excited. So, you can use that to help you. So topics, lectures, kind of topics that relate back to issues that we might be interested in, debates. What's another good thing? Well, one thing I know people like is quizzing. You could have an ancient Indian quiz show, or Indian history quiz show, or some game like that. That might be fun. It can get people kind of excited. But and you should do all of these things and whatever else you're thinking. But the bigger problem we're facing is simply overall, most students are coming in with a lot of family pressure and even internal pressure that say, I need to become an engineer, I need to make a lot of money, and anything that I do outside of that, be it sports or music or arts or history or anything, is completely taking me away from my goal. So we have to kind of frame it in a way that says, well, this is not taking you away from your goal. This is enriching you so you can better achieve whatever goal you want to achieve.
So the idea about the finance thing was, I found it really amazing. Also, so the one problem, the one with the debate that we face is at times usually the institutes, social departments are left leaning. So the thing is, they consider our clubs like us as to be very right wing, and so the problem that comes with debate is we, as a technological institute, we can't, like, there's always a restraint of guest speaking something political and the institute not allowing it. So there's there's a very tough balance that we have to maintain. Like the topics which are hot and burning, they're often political, and we also have to maintain the interest of the people. So that's a
Yeah,
very tough line to go there.
it is a tough line. So are you saying that the Institute is taking a position where, I don't know, they would be happy to invite Arundhati Roy to speak, but not happy to invite Rajiv Malhotra or something?
Probably, like they'll always the institute always has the tendency not to indulge any kind of extreme views into the arena. So
Right.
like,
Right.
yeah.
And like we discussed today, I mean, nobody wants extreme views. I mean, the whole thing, we're all trying to get to the center. So, and I understand that because, I mean, I dealt with all of that a lot. And this is, again, the polarizing thing. You invite a guy that, I mean, even my talk, Indian pluralism, I mean, there's probably people out there that think, oh, this guy is like a hardcore, you know, right-leaning guy or whatever. And he's saying India is great all the time. And I'm like, I'm not at all, actually. But I'm also not the guy that's, you know, India bashing. I mean, I try to be in the, I mean, that's the whole book I wrote was on the Raya part. It was all about trying to get a little bit more to the center. So try to find topics that, you know, like if you did this finance thing, you know, that you can like sneak this stuff in, you know what I mean? But you also have to pick your speakers too, because it's not easy to find a speaker that will be non-polarizing, you know, because a lot of speakers love to be polarizing, you know, it gets them more views, it's more excitement. And, you know, in a way, I understand the Institute wants to kind of stay away from that kind of thing. So if you can kind of like, you know, not a type of subversion, but subtly, you know, bring things in and also try to find speakers who are open, and then, you know, do something, you know, have a lecture about Islamic history in India. You know, why not? We have to embrace all of these things. Have a lecture on Jainism. Have a lecture on Sikhism. You know, that's all part of our heritage. And if we don't accept that, have a lecture on colonialism. That's also part. That's what I'm saying. Like, I cannot like certain things about history, but you can't deny history. And the worst way to deny history is to not know it and just go on what Twitter tells you. You know?
Yes, sir.
So like broaden your scope, centralize your topics, and then maybe you build this up a little bit, and then, you know, you can kind of you can you know, build out from that. Yeah. So anyway, that's
Yes.
what I think. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, yes.
Hi, sir. So, actually, I wanted to ask a quick question regarding the philosophical aspect of Indology. On our campus right now, we have a Bhagavad Gita course, which is taken by around 200 people every year, and most of them are very unaware of this Indian philosophy and Bhagavad Gita, and so this provides them with a window to get into all of this stuff. But unfortunately, for the rest of the 500 or 600 people, it's they think of it like some religious course or something which is backward or pulls them uh, 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 like pushes them backwards, right? So philosophy, I felt, is a good way of pulling people into Hinduism, because not Hinduism but Indic culture, because it is something which actually helps them in their daily life.
Yes.
So something on these lines, if we can put forward philosophy in a non-religious fashion.
Yeah. So I hear you.
Regarding,
Sorry, go ahead.
so like, I wanted to know if you have any ideas around this, on how we can do this.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're really hitting an important point. So, I absolutely understand what you're saying. You teach a Bhagavad Gita class, and everyone thinks that you're like a Hindu indoctrinator or something, and you know, this guy's just talking religion, and you know, we don't do that because we're a secular place and all that kind of stuff. But then, so then you say, okay, let's not have a Bhagavad Gita class. Let's have a Indian philosophy class. Okay, that's good. But then, in a weird way, we're also falling into the secularist trap by not being able to say, I want to teach the Bhagavad Gita because I think it's a great piece of literature and a great piece of wisdom. And yes, it happens to be religious because that's how it's been defined, again, by the West. You know, there was a period when we didn't even have a concept of like religions as these separate things. People just had their different traditions that they were attached to. So I totally understand where you're coming from. And this is what I mean about sometimes, even though I don't like it, you have to be a little subversive in the way that you get in there. So yes, instead of a Bhagavad Gita class, say Indian philosophy, introduction to Indian philosophy, or something like that. And philosophy is much more attractive to people. But then, you know, they'll find out that in a text that is ostensibly called religious, there's an incredible amount of philosophy going on there. So yes, I think, again, like what An was asking, like we must teach these things, not because they're religious. I mean, I believe you should teach religion like any other subject if you had to do it. But more than that, A, these are things that are related to our culture and our history. So that's very important. And B, like you said, they give us these ideas and tools that will help us as we move forward. And they're good for everybody. And you don't have to be a Hindu to read the Bhagavad Gita. No one said that, you know? Like, you can just read this stuff. Anyone can read. That's the beauty of what India was about. If you really believe in what India was about, anybody can do whatever they want. I mean, we had our own problems, which, of course, we still have to deal with those. We do. Absolutely, we do. But in the grand picture of things, it's available to everybody. Certainly now. And I hope, you know, that I really feel like we should be teaching this stuff more. Because, like I said, you want to read a book on the Bhagavad Gita now, I have to go to someone in London or France or America, because nobody in India is writing a book on Bhagavad Gita. I mean, they are, but not like at that scholarly level, that depth, or in that type of scholar. I'm not to say that people are not writing scholarly things in India, but it's different. Anyway, that's what I think. I hope that was kind of helpful.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Yash, did you go to IIT ever, or?
Sir, actually, I had attended your lecture at IIT Gandhinagar, but online I had attended, not.
But you look familiar, and your name is familiar too.
So maybe you looked into the. I had asked a question also. I remember.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
I hope that helped or made sense.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay,
Actually, yeah. I'd like to personally thank you and for the reason being, I really appreciate the works of your work and Mr. Danino's work, and the work that is being conducted at IIT Gandhinagar. Being someone from Ahmedabad, I feel really proud that an institute such in such close proximity has such a strong social sciences department. So I guess we have come to the end of the talk. I would like to thank you again, sir, for
Yeah,
taking out
welcome.
time to
Yeah,
deliver this stuff. Thank you, sir.
I'm very happy that you all are doing this, and go forward, be open, you know, really, truly try to live that great philosophy of inclusion, diversity. I mean, that's the best way we can do it. We say truly live it, you know? And like I'm saying, you have to embrace the things that you don't like. That's the greatest
Yes.
challenge.